Here we are on the cusp of another big storm on Sugarloaf Key at Willy Benson's house.
Yeah, 2020. She just doesn't give up, does she?
No. Do you go by Willy or Will?
That's a really good question. A lot of people that know me now call me Will. You've known about me for probably a long time,
right.
And probably from some of the people that called me Willy back in the day when I was cleaning boats in Sugarloaf Marina.
Is that because you were just younger? You were Willy?
Yeah, I was just Willy when I was a kid. And so I think the people that know me or, the part of me that harks back to the Sugarloaf Marina cleaning Timmy Carlisle's boat and, some of those old guides there, I'm still Willy. And so it's kind of a soft spot in my heart to be called Willy. A little bit, but it's nice to have both,
right.
To be professional Will, and then some of my real close clients and friends and, especially around Sugarloaf Marina, the guys just call me Willy, even to this day.
May I call you Willy?
You may.
All right, Willy.
I think you have, since we met.
Yeah. That's what I knew you as because I started coming to the Sugarloaf Marina with Harry Spear 35 years ago. Right. And I'd see you around and, in partying, and when you were with Hell's Bay, we were around, but never really spending, a concentrated amount of time. But, with that being said, thank you so much for allowing us to come here.
It's such a pleasure to have you guys here. This is looking forward to it for a long time.
So we're in the treehouse. Tell me about this, your home here.
Yeah, this is the treehouse. It's
that's what I've always heard. Willy lives in the treehouse.
I do. I bought this house 18 years ago or something like that. And when I first moved in, there were no windows. There was no air conditioning. There was no insulation. There was just screen shutters with big wood shutters that we'd have to close during a rainstorm or something like that. And it was a fish camp, a treehouse fish camp that, was a great bachelor's spot. And then I met my future wife, and she kind of put her foot down after we got married.
We need windows and air conditioning.
Alice was on the way. So
yeah, of course.
Yeah. I decided to, do a little renovation around here for our first child, Alice. And it was really cool. This house, I'll just quickly tell the story. An old hippie named Jim Hash, who used to run a limousine service in Washington, D.C., which you can read into what that business really was.
Jim Hash.
He bought this property in the mid-'70s, and he moved down here for a couple of years with his crazy hippie girlfriend, and they had acquired a couple of shipping containers, old wooden shipping containers from the Pacific Northwest. And they brought it down here, and they disassembled the shipping containers and literally bent the nails back into the straight positions and reused all that reclaimed wood to build this house. So
wow.
This house is constructed from shipping containers that were used to ship goods all around the world. So this house has been around the globe,
right.
Quite literally. It feels like a sailboat sometimes when we're in here and the wind's blowing and it's moving and shaking and creaking. So it's got a lot of character to it, a lot of love in it, and a lot of history in these boards. I mean, the wood that we're looking at is probably 200 years old.
Wow.
Really old, Pacific yellow pine.
But
the termites don't touch it.
But it's so perfect for you because I see you as really a free spirit. I know your parents took your family to France for a while, to give you a bit different perspective of Europe and a different look than what you had seen here in this country.
They did. My dad walked into dinner one night and said, "Hey, you guys want to move to France?" And my brother and I were like, "Where the hell is that?" And then
so you grew up in Key West?
Yeah, I was born in Key West, in Stock Island, actually.
And so when did you go to France?
When I was 9 years old. So it was 1989. And I remember watching the Iraq War on when we
in Baghdad
or not in Baghdad. Well, when we went in and got took care or reclaimed Kuwait and liberated Kuwait. All of that I remember watching on this really grainy television that we had in France. That we it wasn't a real TV. We would watch it only for really important things. And
right.
I remember when that was going on, the Berlin Wall came down.
Sure,
it was a really monumental time, and we happened to be in Europe and. Living in the middle of rural countryside France and just near Bordeaux in the Dordogne region where they hunt for truffles with pigs.
Right.
We found truffles with pigs and cep mushrooms, and Dad did a variety of businesses of selling vacuum cleaners, chocolate chip cookies, worked in a mushroom factory. I mean, we did some pretty eclectic stuff, but He also documented it and wrote for Gourmet magazine. So our family story was published in Gourmet magazine years ago. But it was a wonderful time. We grew up on tractors. We bought a farm. We rebuilt an old farmhouse there while we were there. So a lot of manual labor, a lot of farm labor as a 10-year-old kid. I was driving a tractor around, hunting, walking around the hills. My first exposure to skiing, my first exposure to playing ice hockey. So it was a really wonderful experience. And by the time we came back, I hardly knew how to speak English anymore. It was all French.
Do you still speak French?
I do. It's not as easy to remember,
right.
but it comes back with a bottle of wine and.
Oh, cool. Are you inspired to take your young family to France?
Yeah,
and do
so
the same?
my wife's Australian, and our kids have been to Australia. I think Alice has been 7 times, and she's 8 years old.
Wow.
She's been across the Pacific to Australia 7 times. So we've spent a lot of time in airplanes and international airports already in their young age. So absolutely, we love travel, international. I think we're an international family. It's, you get to go occasionally on fishing trips and whatnot, but yeah, 100%, I want them to see the world.
Outside of the Keys.
Right.
So take me back. Was your dad a big fisherman? How'd you get into fly fishing?
My dad was not a big fisherman. I don't think he really knew anything about fishing, to be honest. And so I got into fishing when we came back from France. We were fiddle farting around in the summertime, and my parents put their foot down and said, "You guys just can't be hanging around the house with nothing to do. So you have to pick a hobby." And so my brother picked like baseball card collecting, and I thought about it.
That's
and I was
a hobby.
Like, yeah, it's a hobby. I was like, all right,
Yeah.
whatever, jolly. And I thought about it, and I was like, man, well, I bet I can get out of the house and get away from my parents if I had a boat, And so maybe what's the thing you do to get a boat? Oh shit, I picked fishing, And so it was just out of wanting to have some freedom. I didn't even like fishing or care about fishing. I just wanted to get the hell out of the house. And if I chose fishing, that meant I could, work towards getting a boat, getting outboard. That my parents said, if you, we'll match you. So if you save up $400 to get an outboard, we'll match it so you can get an $800 outboard. And so it took a little, a month. I did a lot of chores and all that stuff.
Good for you.
Saved up $400 and found a little outboard for $800 and, put a first little, tinny boat together, a little aluminum boat. And I was immediately up to the marina and met Tim Carlisle and Cliff Carlisle and, Steve Gray, Dan, Key, all those old time legends that were up there. And I just fell in love with it.
Do you remember the first time you pushed off from the dock with your new boat?
I don't. Well, the first time I would have ever pushed off the boat, I did actually build a boat with my father. We were building a part of the old house, which is actually right next to, my parents built that house right next to us. And that's my childhood house that I grew up in. And we were building part of the house, and we used some 3/4 inch plywood, some PT plywood, and built a little boat. And I used to get in that boat with a cinder block as an anchor, and I'd go paddle out to the end of the canal, and I could go that far, but I couldn't leave the sight of the house because my mom could be in the kitchen. She could look down the canal.
Oh, how cool.
And if she could see me, then I was okay and I was safe and I was allowed to go that far. And I think, that was when I was 7 or something like that. And I just remember sitting out there for hours. I'd be out there and just messing around, jumping in and out of the boat, rearranging my anchor, just playing at the end of the canal, as far as I could get away from the house, always at the limit, at the edge. And
did you ever think what's out there and you look
always,
over the horizon?
I still think that. I think that's my driving thought.
Yeah. It's interesting because when I was first fishing with Harry, like 35 years ago, Harry Spear, he said when we were running back towards Isla Mirada, he said, I remember when I was younger and I look at the Petersons and I used to think, what's out there?
Right.
What's out there?
The unknown.
Yeah. And I think that's the curiosity that really drives you or anybody to really become a great fisherman, because you're looking for newness and to get away and to go over further.
And that can be
away.
Geographic,
right?
Or intellectual.
For sure. Absolutely.
It's that quest to discover the unknown, to learn more. And what you realize, as you guys know, that the more you encounter and the more you discover and the further you push that, the more you realize there's so much more to figure out and so much more to learn.
For sure. Well, I so admire you because your life has got such a great spectrum, starting with your family in this treehouse and growing up in Key West and going to France, obviously, as a young child. But now, as a grown man, you became a great fisherman. You became your film work is outstanding with World Angling. And then you became a conservationist, but then you really jumped into it big time. And tell me about this big new referendum that you guys just won, because I saw your film, Silver Lining, talking about what these cruise ships are doing to Key West. What is it doing to the coral base, and what's happening with all these people and the inundation of thousands in Key West, and what it's doing to the fishery?
Yeah, those are all really great questions. And I think I just have always approached this stuff. I can't shake it. I love this place. I love these fish. I love this territory.
Right.
And it's, I have some historical perspective. I remember when Turkey Basin had, sea fans, and I grew up on those coral heads inside of Mallory, inside of Marvin. Some of them don't even exist anymore, and so I've kind of felt a little pain over the years watching, what's happened down here. And I've, I guess decided to do something about it. I want it to be better for my children. I don't know how to get there or what to do, but you take one step and then you take another one. And, in 2013, they were proposing to dredge the harbor of Key West and make it bigger, not necessarily deeper. They just want to make it wider so they could fit these Panamax giant ships in here. And they were ready to put the city into debt to $35-40 million. And I just thought it was unconscionable, and I couldn't handle it. So
how did you fight that? And your brother's a big part of this.
My
whole
brother's,
movement.
my brother's my partner in these activities. I don't even know why. I mean, we fought so much as kids. I guess we got good at fighting.
Well, we all grew up.
We all grew up, and Jolly's he's a piece of work. I love him, and I think I the way I fought that in 2013 is I sat behind the computer. I remember the night that it happened. That whole Silver Lining, I pieced that thing together in 4 hours. It just came out of me.
The writing was great.
Everything
was perfect. You have a helicopter shooting these big ass, stupid ass cruise ships.
Yeah, and it just poured out of my soul. I don't know how to explain it better than that. It just kind of like, it was inside me, and it just had to come out, and it was its own animal.
It was in there for years.
Yeah, and it just came out, and I think that was a catalyst that I needed, and that my brother needed, and people watched, and it just kind of fired the whole thing up. And my brother decided to take that torch that I had lit with they actually had a referendum back then to go into debt and to explore this dredging thing. And he fought it, and he stayed on environmental message. And we worked at it together. And that was our first, political victory down here in Key West with regards to the cruise ships. And we pushed back. The big ships weren't going to come in. They didn't dredge the National Marine Sanctuary and the corals that the Palolo worms live in, and everything like that. We really, we thought it was a big win for us at the time. And then, this 2020 hit, the coronavirus pandemic and everything else. And we just started to look at it and say, this is, since 2013, it had just been more and more and more cruise ships, bigger ones. And we've watched what's happened to those fish down there. We're watching what's happening to the snapper grouper populations, to the stone crabs, to the lobsters, and the rest of it. And, it's so obvious to us that was an issue. But beyond that, it's also, just a good business. The coronavirus and the super spreader status of those cruise ships. Sure. Guys are calling me and saying, hey, are we going to go fishing? Because I don't want to come down into Key West if they're bringing cruise ships in there. So it's clear that there was multiple parts to this. There's an environmental component, there's a health safety component, and then there's just the quality of life of being down in Duval Street or down in Key West and having 10,000 people on the street. And the citizens here had really been uncomfortable with that for a long time for all of those reasons, but nobody had stepped up and done anything about it. And so we just said, this is the time to pivot. I don't want to take anybody's jobs away or anything like that. But when cruising was stopped and it was halted, and it became clear that this pandemic was going to last for a long time, and that our economy down here was going to transition in one way or another, we thought it was the most responsible time to introduce these referenda at that point, because it was really the time that we should all be transitioning and pivoting. And so we put 3 referenda on the ballot to limit the size and the capacity and the disembarkation numbers in Key West, and then to give environmental and health safety preference to the cruise lines and cruise ships with the best records. So those 3 items went on the ballot. We were strong in saying we wanted these to go on the ballot in the presidential election. We're going to get the highest voter turnout. We're going to get the most accurate democratic representation of where our city and our citizens stand. We were adamant about that. We didn't want to move on this. If the citizens didn't want to do it, we didn't want to do it, but we felt that they did. And we were right. We won a very good victory by a pretty good margin, especially on the environmental stuff. I mean, we came in at 81%. I mean, that's awesome. That's a mandate. Now, that's a big mandate.
Would that stick now? Is that everlasting?
Well, we have, work to be done, Andy. These things are complicated, as I'm learning. There's, they could usurp it in Tallahassee with the legislative effort. There's, all the lawsuits. There's all different ways that this can go. But the voters have spoken. And I think it shows clearly that this community cares about it's about the community, about its quality of life, about the environment. I mean, this is who we are down here, is attached to the ocean. It's why the people come here. It's the basis for our tourist economy. And we need to do everything we can to shepherd and protect that, and that's, I think, as I've grown older as a guide and seen that, and I think I've decided to, try to do what I can to, get other fishing guides and anglers organized to, take on some of these issues. Because if we don't, the things that you and I love, right?
Yeah.
All this, I just can't sit back and watch it. I got to do something about it. And I don't know.
Good for you.
Yeah,
it's got to be one of the biggest victories of your career.
Yeah. I mean, these things are always hard, though. It's emotional when you go through these and you put yourself out there and you see the hate. There's other people on the other side that, feel differently and they're strong about it. And then, people on our side, it takes courage to raise these issues, to fight for them. And
it takes effort.
Takes effort.
Yeah.
And I think it also takes empathy.
Right.
At the end of the day, when you win, it's not time to thump your chest. It's time to turn and say, hey, how can we all come back together, and how can we work on all of this together, and bring the other side into the conversation. And that takes, I just think, a lot of strength and leadership, something that's new to me, but I'm learning. And I'm really, really proud of our Guides Association down here, the leaders, Doug Kilpatrick, Andrew Tipler, John O'Hearn, Bob Paulson, the guys that have been a part of this organization. I think that we're doing a fantastic job down here, and I'm really excited to watch the new guys coming in. We have some really fantastic, talented guys, talented fishermen who are taking up that leadership torch, and I'm just really excited. And I feel that we're blessed to have this organization and this group of guys down here who just love it. They care about it, and it's great to see.
Well, anyone who knows your name, they think of Key West and permit. So how's the permit fishery in Key West currently?
It's hurting. I think it's still one of the great places to come fly fish for permit. It's a domestic location. You can fly in. The quality of guiding is outstanding.
Right.
Whether you book, one of the hottest guides, in my opinion, is Brandon Sear. He's on it down there fishing hard. Or, you go with Dale Perez, who both sides of the age spectrum there. The experience level that you're going to get with the youngest or the oldest or anywhere in between is second to none. This is the best place to learn how to fly fish, period, whether it's tarpon, bonefish, or permit. But permit being, in my opinion, the hardest fish, I think that having a great educator, or a great coach, a great guide is going to be the single thing that's going to make the biggest difference. And I think we have the best in the world down here.
Right.
And so for that reason, I think that this is a wonderful place to come fly fishing for permit. We still have good numbers of fish, but when I grew up and you saw it, I didn't permit fish for singles, man. I fished for schools. There was a school at Key. So I'm going to give away Timmy's spot here.
I'll edit that out.
Sorry, Timmy.
Yeah. I remember it was like 10,000 fish in that channel, all of them 40 pounds, just spectacular. And I could go, a year, 2 years, never even see a 40 pounder now. They're all these like, smaller,
Right.
almost sexually mature fish. Maybe just they had one spawning, and then we just don't see them. We don't see the big ones anymore. And that's concerning. We don't see the numbers of them on the flats. It's shifting, and it's, I'm concerned about it.
How much are we losing to sharks in the Western dry rocks where they spawn?
Listen,
that's a big contention
I'm not
thing.
a scientist, and I know that I've gotten
Hate mail and
I got dead permit put on my kid's swing. This is the kind of
that's a war.
This is the
between
heat.
That's a war between the flats guys and the offshore guys.
I don't know if it's a war. I certainly don't want it to be a war. I think
it's a fight for a fishery.
But yeah, it might be a fight for, yes. I guess we see it one way and they may see it differently.
Correct.
I do not spend enough time on Western dry rocks to answer that question. I'm not gonna, because I'm not out there. I know that what the science says.
Right.
And I'm inclined to believe that because it's clear and it was done objectively without prejudice. And I think that there's reasons to be concerned. There's obviously shark depredation that occurs with a lot of species that's concerning down here, and it's something that we need to work with. The actual issue of a spawning site at Western dry, multi-species, by the way. This is grouper, snapper, permit, all kinds of fish that yellowtail, mangrove snapper that all spawn on this site. And,
right.
I just think that that's a well that can continue to feed this. I remember, guys talk about back in the day when mutton snappers would be on the flats, and you could fish for tailing mutton snappers. Well, what happened to that? Why can't we have that? Why can't we get that back? And I would ask that, worked, and I know the light tackle community well. I love some of the guys who may, really disagree with me.
Yeah.
I've known these guys since I was a kid, and I have a lot of respect for where they're coming from, and I'm willing to listen. We may feel differently about a lot of these things or this particular thing, but I feel strongly that if we do the right thing and we can get together, ultimately, there's going to be more groupers, more snappers, more permit, and it's going to be better business for all of us.
I think that your finest hour is your hour you're living now with conservation. And now with the maturity of Will versus Willy, people are willing to listen. You have weight with the referendum, with the cruise ships, and everybody's starting to take a closer look at what you're saying. And I think what's really important is when people monitor the resource, the wildlife and the fisheries, we should act on behalf of the fishery and on behalf of the wildlife, and not on behalf of the people that are chasing these animals and fish. So in my perspective, I have no voice down here, but as a
Sure you do, Andy.
Well, I just see like a classic example when I have been up in Boca Grande. I see all these tarpon that are being hooked and killed by sharks. They're eating them every day. Why is that not a sanctuary? People could go find tarpon elsewhere. I see what's happening in Bahia Honda and certain areas down here when during the worm hatch, you got 60 boats on top of these fish. And I think these fish need these worms for some sort of protein or whatever, because the spawn is right during that period. Why not leave these fish alone for that 1 week? Not the whole year, but just certain areas for a certain small period of time to protect the resource and give these animals a chance to do what they really need to be doing.
Well, I think you raise really important issues, and I don't have the answers to those, and I don't think science has the answers to those yet. So let's just back up for a second and think about, okay, like if we want to do these big things that we all kind of see, we got to start somewhere, right? And so I think organizing, getting people together in a room and having good quality discussions. What do you think? And what do I think? And listening very carefully and building trust is the starting point. And I'm seeing that in the Guides Association. I'm seeing that with the National Marine Sanctuary and with the FWC officials starting to listen to some of the expertise of, guides, anglers like yourself,
biologists,
scientists, but fishermen sitting with biologists.
Right.
And actively participating. Look, one of the greatest things is this BTT acoustic tagging program that we've done, right? Like, you can have every idea that you want. You may or may not be right? But we've gone out and we've captured these tarpon. I did one with Aaron Adams. It's a great story. We caught this fish and in Seaplane Basin. It was in April. Nice big fish, like 110-pound fish or something like that. Brought it up, and I don't usually land tarpon, but for science, I'll land a tarpon. So I brought the fish up to the boat, and we inserted a tag, an acoustic tag into it, and sure enough, this fish went as far up as Georgia, and then came right back the following year back in Seaplane, and we got to see. There's no question about it. Like, right. This is what happens.
This is where they go.
This is where they go.
Right.
This is who
not a
these,
guess.
This isn't a guess anymore.
Yeah.
And after time, when you do enough of that, it begins to paint a very clear picture of what's going on. And then, I think if you can get fishermen to look at that and understand how science is done, what the results mean, and therefore stand behind some sort of regulatory action, that's the process.
That's the first step.
Those are the first steps of traction. And when we can get there, then we can start looking at other areas. Oh, I think there's a problem here or there. Well, great. But hey, science may come back and be like, there's no problem. It's actually not what you think it is. It's something else. We've learned some really cool stuff. Like, just for a second with the spawning stuff, like the most critical thing down here are the loggerhead sponges, because the loggerhead sponges have a certain type of snapping shrimp that snap and emit an acoustic kind of, sound out there that attracts, post-larval juvenile lobsters, stone crabs, fish of every sort. And that the snapping, the clicking sound,
right,
is what is the catalyst for all of it. And it's dependent on the loggerhead sponge.
And so when you remove those,
right? And so if we think we have this problem, your problem isn't with the hogfish, right? It's with the snapping shrimp, because the larvae's not settling where it needs to. And so science is so capable of diving into those details and answering some of those questions that I just think we got to do more science. I'm a big believer in that. We got to look very critically at ourselves, at this process, and work really hard to find the solutions, and try to do it in a way that's brings people together and doesn't divide them. And I understand that change is hard. It's hard to have these conversations. There's a lot of emotions on it, but again, leadership. I look at guys like Doug, and John O'Hearn, Bobby Paulson. These guys have been part of the leadership down here. Steve Friedman and Isla Morada, and even Flip and Chico and all, Sandy Moret being. I mean, your podcast with Sandy was, it touched my heart. I mean, that guy's awesome.
Yeah.
And so I think building that leadership and building those kind of values and bringing new guides who are just starting out and saying, hey, it's not just go out and catch as many fish as you can. It's like, get involved. Stand up for something, go to the meetings, like work with us on that stuff. I think if we can continue to do that, there's a bright future for us here.
There's hope.
Yeah.
Well, you were talking about numbers and hard science and gathering intel. Is it true or not true that these fish that spawn on Western dry rocks are the flats species of permit and not the Gulf offshore species? Isn't there two different species, and the permit that spawn on Western dry rocks are the permit that you see on the flats?
The science that we've done with the methodology that we employed indicates pretty strongly and very clearly that that's the case, that there are two subspecies of permit, or two, genres. Right. I don't even know scientifically what you call it, but basically two groups of fish. You think about like the jocks and the nerds, like in the playground, like, well, the jocks all go to Western dry rocks, and the nerds go over to the wreck off of, the Gunvor wreck off, or whatever they're going to go and spawn. Right. But there are like two classes of fish that go to different areas. And what we've noticed is a very high fidelity, between the fish that are spawning at Western dry rocks and the flats where they are feeding. So we believe that the flats, specifically from, like Johnson Key, Barracuda Key, all the way out to the Marquesas, including the ocean side of Key West, all travel and migrate to Western dry rocks to spawn at certain times of the year. So, pressure at that site is, really affecting the fish that are being fished for by a different group of people, the flats fishermen versus the offshore. They're being pressured, the flats fishermen.
So the decline of your fishery, you say it's dropped a little bit. You think, unlike the big bonefish in Isla Morada, that was a certain fish that just kind of went away. It might have been a different DNA. the cold front really whacked those fish, and they're just not around anymore. You think we're losing a lot of our permit to commercial fishermen?
I don't think, no, not commercial
Because
fishermen.
the netters were banned.
It's not
That
commercial
was banned.
fishermen.
It's just sport fishermen
And
or light tackle.
I think that, yes, I think that there's shark predation occurring there. I
Right.
think that place during the spawn, mutton, snappers, groupers, permit, the rest of it, it's the amount of boats and pressure that's out there, it's just unsustainable.
Right.
We got to let these fish spawn. And listen, man, I'm fighting as much for the groupers as the permit. It's not fair, just because I'm a flats guide and I care about, my livelihood is chasing, permit. There's a bigger philosophical, ethical question here. And I stand firmly behind, like, if we let them spawn, the snappers, the groupers, the rest of them, we don't pressure them. And listen, you put 60 boats on top of a very small area that has mutton snappers spawning, groupers spawning, permit spawning, all at the same time, and you're power chumming it, right? You're creating a feeding frenzy. Mm-hmm. You're bringing and training sharks to come to that area. So it makes the shark's job a lot easier. And then beyond that, just think about the stress hormones that these fish have, and what that does to the reproductive cycle. You're just not going to have a successful spawn when you're totally stressed out.
Getting bombarded.
Think about your own bedroom,
Sure.
Like, do you want to, get frisky when there's, somebody, stomping around outside or knocking at the door?
Right.
It's the same way. It's just
Right.
These fish are stressed out. We gotta reduce the pressure on that critical spot. And I believe that it's going to pay dividends for us. And I like eating fish. I don't have any problem with killing fish, if it's appropriate for the right reasons and it's done with the right limits that are science backed. I have no problem with people coming to the Florida Keys, hiring a guide, going out and catching fish to eat. I like to eat fish. My kids love, snappers and yellow jacks and stuff that we go out and catch here on the flat. So it's not about that. It's about the ethical question of how do we make it better and preserve it,
Right.
and science points clearly that this is a very, very important spot that needs protection. But we got to also at the same time think a little bit outside the box, right? And this is my challenge to the federal government here. Their playbook of, let's just close it and leave it alone doesn't work.
Right.
Right? It may work in certain instances, right? Riley's Hump south of the Tortugas was closed. Yeah, the mutton snapper fishing's getting better. Red snappers are back, groupers. I mean, the science is correct. It's been a success. It's a model that we can move on. But you can't ask guys to just constantly, be okay with closing everything. They've closed most of the reef to my offshore buddies. There's closures everywhere, for these guys. And what have we done? We haven't, they're just being told, you can't go there more and more, and they're not opening it back up. So we need to think outside the box. We need to start looking at, habitat restoration, habitat mitigation, artificial reefing. How can we take the resources of our industry, the angling community, matched with federal dollars for infrastructure, support for infrastructure growth, and build on that to get hands-on with this environment? Again, with science leading the way, how can we enviro engineer this place to create, fishing spots for guys? If we're asking them to give something up,
We have to give them
we got to
something.
give them something.
Right.
And for so long that we've been told no, no, no. And so, I'm going to try to do whatever I can to change that dynamic. I think if we got, there's a program, Rigs to Reef, we got some oil infrastructure stuff out of Louisiana. We scrub it, we clean it, and we put it in 300, 400 feet of water south of the Marquesas. And we're talking about something that's hundreds of yards long, superstructure. You're going to create the best fishing spot on the planet.
Right. Al Pfluger did that. The Pfluger Reef up there outside
Right.
of Miami. They've got a reef that's a mile long.
Right.
And I don't know how many yards wide, but they brought in all these barges and sank them.
Right. And look, I'm working with Joe Weatherby down here, who's a character. I love Joe. I've got to know him on the SAC Council. He sank the Vandenberg. We can do this.
Right.
We can do this. And if the offshore guys and some of the guys who stand, adamantly against the closure at Western Dry Rocks. I get it. I feel it, and if that gets regulated and closed seasonally, you can bet your ass the first thing I'm going to do is I want to turn around and offer the sanctuary proposal to put other fishing spots in place so that these guys have places to go. And I think we can use that model to
influence,
to make this place better, to make it better for our clients, to catch more fish, to follow science, and ultimately, be better business, more sustainable economy, more resilient economy. We got to start now. And we got to get over the, putting dead fish on people's property and start talking and thinking clearly about the science and working together instead of arguing. That's one of the pet peeves I have about our industry. I think at times it can get a little bit of like, oh, well, this is my fishing spot, or this is my right. Look, I'm a conch. I was born here. I have no right to
fish
Sugarloaf
but the
Beach
fish
more
don't
than
have
anybody
a
else.
right?
Right, exactly. The fish don't have a right. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
We got to get over this at times this pettiness and start thinking about the big picture.
Right. Let's go to a fun place.
Yeah, then please.
Let's go to a fun place. But I really appreciate, your point of view and your thoughts and the success that you've had. Because if you go to the book Mile Marker Zero, when you had Jim Harrison and Tom McGuane and Bronigan, Jimmy Buffett, they were all down here, Guy Valdine, and they did the movie Tarpon. They all left because Key West was changing. And now you see the cruise ships and what they're doing. I get it. And thanks to you and your efforts and your brother and all the other people involved.
Arlo and Evan, our childhood friends, that this is what we all played baseball together. The four of us, we did this referendum. I'm super proud of it.
Success to you guys. I mean, huge kudos. Let's get back to the early.
I want to make one other point though, Andy, before we leave this. And I agree. Let's talk about some actual fish, man, because that's what I love. I look a little bit jealously at guys like Steve Huff and, some of the early Dale Perez and the guys that were Tom Evans that were exploring, these fisheries and finding stuff. I think it's wonderful. I would have loved to have had that. And I kind of had a little bit of that in my childhood, but where these guys found it and discovered and built this industry, they've done such a great job, but it's now, I believe, our generational challenge to protect it.
Right.
They got to find it and now we get to protect it. And it is what it is. But for anybody that's out there in the industry, if you're not thinking about that, think about, how much longer do we have and what are we going to leave for our kids, And I think fishing is one of the greatest industries. It's sustainable. We can, it is big bucks. It's a great engine for our economy here in the state of Florida, but specifically in the Keys. It's something worthy of our best effort. And so, let's put all these differences aside and let's get to work on guaranteeing that these great places that Steve Huff and some of the legends discovered, that my kids, Luke and Alice, are still fly fishing there. Nikki, if you have kids at some point, that they're in the bowling alley, that they're in these places looking at these same magnificent critters that we love. That's the only thing that really matters to me.
Yeah. Good for you. Hear, hear. Talk to me about your early years down here. Now, obviously, you're a tarpon guy. You catch bonefish and permit. You've won 4 permit tournaments, So as a young kid, you probably saw and heard of Del Brown and Steve Huff innovating the sport, catching these, learning how to catch these permit. And then down the road, when you got a little older, you got successful. You started catching all these permit. How many have you caught now for your clients? 200, 300 fish?
I have no idea.
Where are you at? I know that you were way up or close to 300 or whatever. So it became really close to your heart.
Yeah, I don't keep numbers on permit. It's weird. I have no idea how many I've caught. And I have no idea how many I've got.
So many people have. But anyway, your name is on the
Del
Brown.
I know how many tournaments I got.
Yeah. What did that mean to you to end up winning this permit tournament with such a great heritage and the namesake?
Well, I was just listen. You talk about like that book Outliers, right? Of just the circumstances, and I feel that living on Sugarloaf Key, growing up cleaning boats at Sugarloaf Marina, I was just lucky. Pure and simple. I mean, let's cut to the chase. I was just a lucky kid to grow up there, and I saw something and fell in love with it, and used to go out and hunt wading, tailing bonefish in the backcountry with shrimp in my pocket, and I'd come back and they'd go through the wash, and my mom would be so furious. You left shrimp in your pocket again.
And now you have two critters that do that.
I'm really not looking forward to the day that Luke brings shrimp back in his pocket and my wife goes through it. That's gonna be.
You can take Luke and go back out.
I'll smile, but
Run.
I don't think she will. But I was, just grew up with idolizing these guys. Timmy Carlisle was like my freaking hero. Jeffrey Cardenas, my one of my heroes. Jose Wahebe, Flip. All these guys. I was so lucky to grow up in that golden era where things were exploding after a river runs through it, and I was just a kid soaking it all up. And I think that I just challenged myself to get good and to explore and to try to figure it out. And I've always loved kind of going the opposite direction or the opposite grain. So it was always nice when I'd read something in Lefty Kray's Fishing the Flats with Mark Sosin, or I'd read, Stu App's book or whatever, and I read them all. And it would say, oh, this is how you do it, and this is what's up. And then I'd find some other way to do it that was better.
Right.
And I lived for that.
Well, they were older.
Right.
I mean, the innovations today are so profound.
And I think that, when it got to permit, that was to me was just, I think about what was going on in my head when I first started to say, all right, I want to get good at permit. This is a fish that's sexy. It's amazing. It's incredibly difficult. People have had limited success, and I refuse to accept that. So I'm going to just look at it and challenge myself to do it differently or to try to figure it out. And once I started breaking it down and, getting a lot better at catching these, I found myself doing things that were radically different than anything that I had ever read.
And what was that first
just
difference?
From where you fish them, when you fish them, how you throw to them, what angle you're taking on them, what retrieve you're using, the style of fly that you're using. Every single thing that I was doing leading up to the first win that I had, I think down here, was in 180 degrees difference than everything I'd ever read.
Is fly design a very important factor?
Not as much as people think. You can get them to eat anything.
So what's the key to getting them to eat?
I'm reluctant.
I just had this conversation recently with Tim Mahaffey about big downtown bonefish, and he's won, as not the most, but he's won all the big bonefish tournaments, and his methodology was so different than anyone else's.
I think there's a approach. I would say it's a combination of things, right? Like everything, there's no one answer, right? But I would say that there's a few things. First of which is, permit are real smart. They learn. They're conditioned animals. So if you're fishing to the same fish that you fished for 3 days in a row, you're not going to catch them. Stop going to the spot that you see them all the time. Start finding out where
fresh fish.
Yeah, you got to do that. That's straight up, and just so that, and then taking fundamentally different approaches. I see a lot of guides pulling real hard on these fish, pushing hard,
pushing water pushes.
I'm so thankful to Steve Huff and Dell for developing a sport that I love, that's paid my mortgage, that's made a great life for me. But I do take issue with his statement of saying that it's, the permit's, not a fair fish, it doesn't play fairly. And I would challenge anybody that's kind of bought into that to say, is it the fish or is it me? Because I think if you turn around and say, well, it's not fair. Well, have you been there for the last, week on the same tide? Is the fish exhibiting feeding behavior? What's going on? Are you really fishing for that fish at the exact moment when he's most likely, or she is most likely, to eat the fly? I think if you start peeling back the layers a little bit, you'll see that there's the permit's a far more complex animal, and that it requires an enormous amount of attention to detail and to thought and to observation to really get inside its head and to, I guess, push back on that statement a little bit. It's totally a fair fish.
Well,
so if you're saying if you get all the details correct and all the stars align, you're going to get a bite out of that permit.
They're catchable.
They're very, very, very catchable. I don't say, listen, some days they're just hard, but then you get to say, well, look, okay, it's this moon in October. There's these kind of conditions, they're doing this, is this week the week to catch them? Maybe not. Maybe they're pre-spawning. Maybe they're doing something else. Maybe they're eating something that, is different than what you're throwing. There's a lot of critters.
They're exclusive to that
They're
meal.
exclusive to this.
Right.
So you're saying, oh, it's not fair. Well, you're not.
They're fair. You're just understanding
an
their
idiot.
fairness.
Right. You're just throwing the wrong thing at them all the time.
Right.
So get over yourself. Stop thinking that you're right. So I think permit fishing benefits a mindset that is kind of locked in. It's about numbers. So I hear so many people say, if I get this many shots on this conversion ratio, it'll equal this many fish. And so I'm always kind of adjusting the numbers, right? It's kind of like, how the Red Sox won the World Series back then. It was kind of by the numbers, Theo Epstein did that crunching of the numbers and the data played out, right? That's a very good way to get good at permit fishing. But it is not getting to the holy grail. To really understand that, it's about chemistry. You got to get inside the fish's head, and you need to be flexible. You need to be maneuverable. You need to be able to come off of that in key strategic ways at the right time to unlock some mysteries that I still think are out there that a lot of people haven't realized.
What's the biggest mystery that you're trying to find the code to at this point?
I think that we have a lot of changes in our habitat, and I think if you look at what they're eating, they're eating some different things than what we think.
But let's just say they're eating something that we don't know about, but you present a nice, beautiful crab. Do you think that they're going to stay exclusive to what they're eating?
So in some places, at some times of the year, yes.
They won't eat that crab.
They will not.
Even though you got a great presentation and a great feed.
Correct.
What's the greatest new innovation that you know of to make it really successfully, or to be a successful permit fisherman? Because Del and, let's face it, Steve did it a long time ago, but now you're seeing numbers being successfully caught, like with Nathaniel. He's catching a lot of fish. You're catching a lot of fish. The game has changed. Now they're accessible. What made that change?
Well, it's across the board.
Is it weighting?
It's the skiff. How heavy is your skiff?
Right. I was going to ask you, when do you know your angler should be wading to these fish versus fishing out of the boat?
You look at it, you watch them,
water,
and I think and it's just kind of a gut feel. That question, I don't know. You got to look at, is your angler capable of doing that? Are the fish in shallow, or is it, how the approach, when's the right time to get out? I think a guy like Nathaniel, who's capable of doing extraordinary things with the fly rod, is obviously able to scale a mountain that most can't. That is not my day-to-day client.
Right.
So I have a different game plan, that I have to implement for the majority of my clients, because they're not at a Nathaniel Linville skill set, right? They're not at your skill set, Andy. These guys. So I have to approach it, and that means I'm not going to the same areas.
Right.
I'm not throwing the same flies, because they might, and then the leader length is different. The fly line color is different. Whatever combination of things that I think is going to be the best for that individual success.
Right.
I'll try to start with that, and then, see where we go and build on it and build their confidence. But yes, it's everything. It's the boat, the way they build them, the push pull. Just think about push pulls.
Right.
How light are the push pulls that we're using right now? They don't, have fiberglass coming off in your hands. When I first started, I used to have to, every month, spray my push pull with lacquer, to keep the fiberglass
out of your skin,
out of my skin and itching me. So we've made in the fly rods. Are you kidding me? These things are amazing.
Sure.
The technology that we've got is amazing. I will offer, though, that in my opinion, there's one type of technology which is really detrimental to most fishing guides. And they should stop it. And that's a GPS. Best advice I could give to any guide, just turn the GPS off.
Because of the electronics?
Just stop looking at it. It's a crutch. Start paying attention.
Right.
I base decisions oftentimes, I know it sounds crazy, but like on the way the wind smells.
Oh, for sure.
The water level is different today than what it should be on paper, right? And like, why is that? Oh, it's because it's this kind of a tide cycle with this wind applied to it.
Right.
And all of a sudden it's, 3 inches shallower. on this particular day where it should be on paper or on the GPS or on whatever you're thinking, oh, it's this depth. And I think that if you can just stop looking at that GPS, stop using that crutch and force yourself to kind of like pay attention. And I mean, elk hunting's got to be like the zen of that, I would imagine. And the very little I've done, and you guys have done a lot more, but like you don't walk out into to go elk hunting and like look at some electronic device. You're smelling, you're feeling the wind, you're knowing each and every inch of that terrain, you know? You're knowing, oh, if I hunt that animal here on this condition, I have to approach like that. It's the ultimate in that kind of nuance.
But so you're handicapping yourself a little bit if you just totally rely on your GPS.
But how many people use their GPS to actually fish versus to get to a certain spot?
But even that.
He's saying all the above.
All the above.
Everything.
Right.
If you want to go lobster diving, sure, use a GPS. It works real well. It's awesome. And keep a GPS on you in case, you know, you get blinding weather or whatever. I mean, I have a GPS on my boat, but I can tell you it's rare that I turn it on.
Yeah.
It's opening lobster season.
So this May, Dad, no GPS for you. Good luck.
If you're driving around in the dark, but look,
for sure.
What is Crooked? Is he using a GPS to go back there?
No. But what he's done, he's gone out and put big PVC pipes with reflectors, and he's built his own highway.
That's right. But
so it's kind of a GPS, but it was man-made.
That's right. But that guy's like one day away from sprouting gills, man. Like we should all. If you
did you hear our podcast with him?
I think I've listened to it 3 times.
It's insane.
It's insane. I love that guy.
This guy's an alien.
No, he's remarkable.
The most I really cherish our friendship as much as almost anybody I know. He is so honest and so truthful and so loving and so profane. Yeah. And profane plays a big role. Right?
I don't know Mark well. We occasionally see each other and I always just get the biggest smile. I love that man. He's full of wisdom and guidance. And when you hear, that story, he's not using a GPS, man. Even at 20 years in this career, like I'm glomming onto that. Yeah. Like that's truth right there. That this, put it down, start really, if you want to be a great hunter, you have to be animalistic. You need to, feel the same thing that they're feeling. You have to have as good a read as these other critters are, and that's watching the water, seeing the water current. All these are data points that are coming into your head that make you a better decision maker, that make you able at key moments to break away from that preconceived game plan that you had and flexible and dynamic as a fishing guide and as a fisherman. And that, I think, is the single most important quality to be as a permit fisherman.
To get over that hump,
if you really want to be good at it,
right?
You have to be flexible. You got to get outside of yourself, get over yourself, outside of your own head, and just start challenging yourself, relentlessly challenging yourself
to go look,
just to be better
in water.
To be better, to always go with the idea that I don't know what's going on.
It's interesting in the early years of fishing with Harry, when he was just getting into the game, he would never tell his client that he's going to spend the next hour looking at a different spot. So to build his repertoire, he was always looking for a new spot that he thought, and he'd look at night at maps and stuff. So I'm going to go there tomorrow. The tide's going to switch, and I know it's going to be good over here in 2 hours, but for this 1 hour, I'm going to go over here. Do you still do this?
Every day.
Looking at different spots?
Every day.
New spots?
Every day.
You haven't fished?
Every day.
Really? How often are you successful with new spots?
Pretty often.
I mean, you've been here for so long. How can you find new spots after all these years?
Just challenge yourself. You start realizing, oh my God.
It might be the same bank, but fishing it differently.
Sometimes I see Timmy Carlisle sitting in the middle of like some basin. I'm like, and I start scratching my head, right?
You're scouting,
and I'm like,
you're stealing spots like the rest of us.
I'm not stealing Timmy's spot, but I got to think, I'm like, here's Timmy, and he's sitting in the middle of this like 5 foot deep area where I would run over all the time. you know, and then you stop and you're like, well, there's another kind of area or something like this or that. And you start pulling around just randomly, you know,
a similar spot.
just, or yes, exactly. I can't, I mean, if there's a fishing guide and I see somebody and it's, I can never go there in my life. You know, that's like one of the things, you know, if somebody if I happen to, in fact, I fear it. I fear seeing somebody pulling a spot that I've never pulled
because you can't go
because
there.
I can never go there.
And that's a problem when there are so many boats around now.
It is.
And so many people fishing.
It is. But listen, we all have our own problems. And I'm not saying that everybody needs to be like that, whatever. But that's just how I've chosen to try to be. And, you know, obviously there's the great spots that, you know, we found or that people know, you know, that's not really what I'm talking about, you know.
Right.
But I think as you get good at guides, like, you know, I watch John O'Hearn's routine or I see, you know, Diego or Dustin or whatever. And I know where they're going to go fish because we're kind of paying attention to each other and keeping tabs. And I think the good guides rarely have conflict because like, I'm not going to go mess with Dougie's routine. I see where I know he's going to go from this spot to another spot. I'm not going to get there first.
Right.
You know, I'm going to go find my own flow.
But the problem with that too, he might be tarpon fishing that day. He's not around. Why not go to a spot that?
No, you're right. But I mean, it's not that it's his spot. We kind of pay attention to each other's routines.
Right. And if everybody's permit fishing, you know.
You're like, oh, you know, I know Diego's going to jump from this because he did it yesterday and I saw where he was because I drove by 30 minutes later. So you know what? I'm going to try to find my own flow. Right. And I think that if you look at really great guides, it's rare that we have conflict because we all have our kind of flow and we're able to kind of maneuver around each other without having this kind of, you know, ownership of flats. I think that the really great guides are all like that. I pay attention to it. I'm sure they do.
Yeah, I know where certain people like to fish.
Yeah,
and
so I'm gonna go.
And if I don't like that guy,
routine.
I fucking go there.
There's been some problems with that in the past.
Tell me about your film Satori. I thought that was just outrageously great. You know, your permit film with the classical music. Tell me about producing that.
It was yeah. First off, I have to give credit to my my film partner, Dave Tepper, who Dave's just an amazing character of a person, scratch golfer. He's just super talented, and we combined for a number of films over the years. You know, High in the Lowlands being one of his signature pieces that I helped him make, and Satori being mine. But he deserves as much credit in that film as I do. We both shot it and edited it, and you know, put it all together. He did some of the editing. I did some of the editing. I actually edited most of that film in Australia on on a family vacation, which I made.
Oh, good.
I remember making the Beethoven edit portion of it with the tales to, you know, Beethoven symphony and presenting that to my Australian family. And that was the first time it had been shown. And, you know, everybody kind of liked it and they said, oh, isn't that cool and whatnot. And I thought it was, you know, particularly cool. But yeah, it was just a kind of, I guess, a culmination of my permit fishing endeavors to, you know, try to get good at this, to try to capture the essence of what this fish is.
Beauty.
The beauty.
I mean, are you a classical music listener?
Yeah. I listen to it all. I mean, it's one of the interesting things, you know, making these films. I listen to a lot of music and I challenge myself to listen to stuff that I wouldn't normally turn on, or to go back into I took a college class that had classical music. And so I started digging into that and finding jazz riffs, and, you know, went to school in New Orleans, which is a big music scene. And my college roommate was a jazz musician, was there on scholarship. And so got to meet the Marsalis brothers and some other, you know, amazing experiences that I had in college around music. So I have an eclectic and diverse music taste. And I think that's been helpful in, you know, in these films. And I think, you know, that particular one might mark as one of my, you know, signature efforts.
It's unbelievable. So anybody who's listening, go to YouTube and check out World Angling Satori. It's edited to Beethoven and all these permit tailing and on the flats, and it is just breathtakingly great.
Thank you.
It's just absolutely awesome. And then you go to tarpon season, you get Hendrix and some of the old school rock and roll.
Well, that was the inspiration for me. Listen, I grew up, John O'Hearn had had an old VHS copy of that tarpon film before anybody even knew it existed. He had somehow swindled and pirated this thing, but it was missing parts of it because it was, it would like skip. So we didn't have the whole movie, but we used to sit around and in the early days when we were just starting guiding at the Saltwater Angler, and Drew DeLashmit and Sandy. And anyway, a good group of us, we'd have a few too many beers and we'd look at this and I watched it hundreds of times in John O'Hearn's trailer, when he lived on Stock Island with Erica before kids and all the rest of that stuff. And it was a huge inspiration to me, and I just wanted to do our generation's, version. I'm not the filmmaker that Christian Adasso and Guida Lavaldine. I had a lot to learn about that, but I just want to make a hype video that showcased tarpon and, kind of paralleled it a little bit of some of the cool elements of that. But my starting point was like, I just want to do it to Jimi Hendrix.
It was awesome.
But that was a Christmas gift. I made that first film as a Christmas gift to my clients. And it was just, hey, thanks for fishing with me. Here's all of you guys wrapped into a hype video. And, let me know what dates you want to fish next year. And it worked.
That was awesome.
I think that helped fill out the schedule pretty quick, man. Once that thing got out there, it was a power chumming.
See a big old tarpon jump out of the water to Hendrix is like, I gotta be there.
Yeah, right.
How much do you want me to send you?
Yeah, the phone started ringing pretty nonstop after that one.
Well, before we leave, I want to ask you. I heard a cool story. I think you were on like the Tom Rosenbauer podcast or whatnot. I heard a cool story about the year that you won the Merkin or the Del Brown. I think your dog passed.
Yeah.
And you took his hair and you tied your crab flies with his hair, and I think you won that year.
I did.
And how cool is that?
It's really cool. I think each one of the permit victories are special. Perhaps no more so than the first one. I fished with this guy named Mike Allen, who we had a lot of fishing together, and Mike had perhaps some demons, as did I. At that time in our lives, but we were able to overcome and develop this relationship together. That it was a struggle for us to get on top that first time, but that's one of the best ones. I've maybe had a little falling out with Mike over the years, but I reflect back on those years that we dedicated ourselves to this, like really dedicated ourselves. And I read the article about you and Tim Hoover, and that was just like my Bible. And I went to work on permit fishing with the same kind of attention to detail and focus. And I did it with Mike, and that was an amazing one. And then, following that, I kind of stepped away from the tournaments for a lot of years and said, I'm done. And, for one happenstance or another, got back involved, in the Merkin again. And, came back with Mike Dawes, who I really didn't know, but is just one of the world's best guys. He's a fantastic fisherman, a father like myself. So we've, met, had a lot in common, and we just decided we're going to do this athletic event, do the Merkin and take it like athletes. So he's training on a mountain bike. I'm running and doing, push-ups and all that kind of stuff to get involved. And we won the Merkin that year. And then came back, and I think it was the following year or something. We missed a Del Brown together, but I had never won the Del. I'd come really close, and Justin had kicked my ass a number of times. And respect to Justin, he's one of the world's best permit guides. That guy's on point, especially in that week in the Del Brown. And I had lost, like you said earlier in the year, I'd lost my dog Heidi, who was she was awesome. And I needed something extra, some soulful thing. And yeah, I took Heidi Bug's hair, and nobody loved my dog more than Bob Paulson, actually, because Heidi was always out on the street. She was like a neighborhood social dog, and I used to see Bobby come down the street with his boat at the end of the day. He'd be parked out in front of my house, and the dog would be there.
Petting your dog.
He took it harder perhaps than as hard as I did. I got, Bob would call me crying about my own dog,
Oh, he's such a sweetheart.
He's such a great guy. And
yes.
That guy probably has taught me more about fishing and inspired me in my own life more than any other guide or any other person.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, we butted heads a lot in the Marquesas in the early days, but I learned my etiquette from him and my work ethic. And I just respect the crap out of that guy. He inspired me and taught me more than he'll ever know.
Well,
and
he's going to appreciate hearing that.
Well, he's just a remarkable human being.
He is. Absolutely.
100%. And I was running around with my hair on fire as an early kid. And I was like, all right, I'm going to go right to the top and challenge this whole,
your face.
Yeah, in your face kind of fisherman. And, I've grown up a little bit since then, but poor Bobby was the target. But I couldn't have picked a better target.
He's forgiven
I don't know if he's forgiven me or not. I hope maybe if I kick enough cruise ship ass, one day he'll forgive me. No,
I'm sure
I see him a lot and I have the utmost respect, but he was a mentor to me, maybe in an adversarial relationship early on, but I've learned more from that man than probably anybody else. But to finish the story, this dog was amazing. Heidi, she's buried in my yard over there. And we channeled something extra and, tied the, so I think you need that if you really want to win in these tournaments. Sometimes that passion and that emotion and getting fired up helps. And I think, that was the little spark that I put into every single fly, and we were just not going to be denied in that tournament. I think we left the dock on day one and there was this torrential downpour. And I remember, everybody went their different direction. Dustin he was fishing that tournament. He ran one direction and John O'Hearn went the other, and everybody's going around. I just stopped in the middle of it and just watched. And I was like, the game plan that I had is now shit. It's gone. Everybody's running to their game plan. I'm like, I need to completely rethink everything. And we just sat there for 20 minutes and a little crack of sunshine opened up on this one particular area. So I ran over to it and made 3 pushes of the push pole, saw a spike. Mike made about a 90-foot back cast and hooked the fish. And we had the first fish in the boat within 40 minutes.
Wow.
And I was like, this is it. It's over.
It's happening.
Running up the score, baby. And that's what happened. We just started piling on fish. So, and then, then I got a chance to fish with sand flea on the last one. I'll tell this, and this is, as I love that. There's so many great people in fishing, Andy. You meet all these amazing people and characters over the years. It's one of the most special things for me, the people that you meet, and the tournaments particularly. So I think it bonds people in a way that's special. And anyway, Mike couldn't make it, my angler, Mike Dawes. So he put his best friend Sandflea, who's this, amazing character. You should probably do a podcast with him at some point.
Sandflea sounds like something I'd catch a pompano with.
Right. He's an amazing guy down in Holbox, Mexico. Huh. And he fishes.
He's a guide down there.
He's a
right?
guide. He basically is the mayor, the educator, he runs the whole thing down in Holbox. He's the kind of central figure in this tiny fishing village there. And he fishes baby tarpon, snook and whatnot, but he's a really special human being. Had a bout with scarlet fever when he was a kid. So he's got a very, very delicate heart. He has real heart issues. I think he's had, multiple bypasses, even a heart transplant. So anyway, just a very special person that Mike, who's very good friends with Mike. And Mike said it's Sandflea's lifelong wish to come and fish, get a shot, at winning a major permit tournament. So I'd like to, offer him the opportunity. I said, absolutely, let's do it. And I had never met Sandflea. And he showed up here. I picked him up from the airport. And sometimes you just know when you see people, you're like, oh man, this guy's special, and this is going to work. And whatever, we went out there and we just had an absolutely unbelievable tournament together. And he's just a very religious man. So he's, if God's willing, if God's willing. And like, I started off with like, a little bit of faith, but by the end, I'm like, fully on board,
embracing it,
doing the cross, and everything,
buying a gold cross.
Yeah, buying a gold cross. All of that stuff was just, it was wonderful. And I think about, because at some point I managed to pick up some Spanish along the way. So it's interesting. I guided Sandflea most of that tournament in Spanish.
Wow.
Calling the shots in Spanish instead of English to win that tournament.
Oh,
so
cool.
Yeah, it's each one of these things has a little nuance and a little special one. And I'm fishing with a client now, Evan Carruthers, in some of these tournaments, and he's getting dangerously close. He's going to do it. And that'll be really cool, because that'll be, 4 different anglers,
right,
that I've guided to
5 tournaments.
Yeah, 5, if I get one with Evan. And I feel confident that we will. He's a wonderful human being, has all the focus and everything. And we're getting real close on it. And I look forward to it.
How important is tournament winning?
Not that important.
If you make it important,
I think
is it a confirmation of how great you are as a guide?
Yeah, of course it is. There's no doubt. I mean, if you win one of these tournaments, you did something extraordinary. If you win a bunch of them, sure, you did you did it extraordinary a couple of times, but it doesn't really mean that you're the best guide. Yeah, I don't hold those tournaments up and say, oh, the best guides are defined
You're the
by
best guy and the best name. It's a team effort for that week.
Whatever, man. There's guys that, people don't even know about. And one of them is my really good friend, and he refuses to fish tournaments, and he's the best permit guide there is down here.
Simon Becker?
Bill Howes. Bill Howes is one of the most extraordinary permit fishermen on the planet, and he just won't go near it, doesn't have any time for it, won't do it. But a day on the water with Bill is like, you're going to learn something. This guy's extraordinary. And so in any event, I don't think it has anything to do with who's the best or anything. I think it's, if you choose to prioritize it and you find success, it can build confidence. It certainly has with me. I look at it as an opportunity to challenge myself, to eat right, exercise, get mentally prepared, just be the best version of myself that I can be. And that's that process that we go to prepare and then fish during a tournament. It's more about that process. And if you do that really well and challenge yourself, I think the results follow. So it's more about process than outcome for me.
I think too, in the long run, it helps give you, gives your voice. What am I thinking of? I mean, it helps
gravitas,
reconfirm that your voice and what you're trying to promote and sell has substance. Maybe. I mean, look at Steve Huff. Okay, he is just such a class act. I call him the god of guides. He won the Gold Cup. He won all those bonefish tournaments. That put him on the board. But he had to back it up with his ethics and how he represents himself as a person. But I think initially, when you start winning big, you have an audience. Because if you don't have that audience, it's hard to get your voice spread. You'll have an audience in a small area, this marina or over there. But when you do what you've done here in Key West, with the success of how you've caught these tarpon and the relationship with your anglers. And now you've won all these tournaments and you've got all these films. And now you have a voice to go to the referendum and change the dynamics of Key West and the commercialization with these cruise ships. I think it helps in a profound way.
I appreciate that immensely, Andy. I'm not looking for praise or anything, but
it's the truth.
I appreciate it. And I think that the tournaments do help there. It's street cred, right?
Right.
When you talk about salty fishermen, if you don't have the street cred, you just get out of the room.
Because what happens is now your voice, that name, Will Benson, has huge impact in Key West. And Willy Benson has huge impact in this marina in Sugarloaf. But the combination of the two, people know who you are around the world. If they want to go fish Key West, they're going to find whether or not they can fish with Willy Benson. And that's huge kudos to you.
I appreciate it. I hope in the future moving forward that, my name will be associated not only with the, Sugarloaf and permit and these fish and whatnot, but I hope that we're moving into another era of environmental stewardship, conservation, and we can look back at this point and say that there's some turning that happened, and we got the courage to figure some things out. And I'm not talking about myself; I'm talking about all of us collectively. That we can look back and say, when Luke and Alice are fishing, that it's better than it was. I hear a lot about the good old days, and some of those guys in the extraordinary stories, right? I want those to come back. And I want, my legacy to involve being a part of that, to give people, the platforms, or to bring people together to, make a difference. And I think we can do that. I feel, firmly that we're going to do that. And I'm really excited about that, and it's not about any credit or any of that. I just want to see more fish.
Yeah, I hear you.
You know, I want to have great days of fishing, you know, and I'm going to fight, you know, to continue to have that.
But that's what I say. I think this is your finest hour.
Thank you.
Your
But
efforts
it
with what
ain't over. I got a lot to do.
I get that. But this next chapter is going to be very important. And your legacy is going to grow that much more because of this.
Well, I appreciate that. And I think that there's a lot of other guys that are seeing the same kind of thing, you know, and you know, hearing your podcast with Dustin, you know, I'm hearing the same kind of things, and obviously working with Doug and John and those guys, they all feel the same way. It's not just me. Maybe
I get it.
Maybe I've been the one that's been out in public and taking that on a little bit more, but I really got to tell you that these other guys that I'm talking about have really been some of the, you know, major, you know, effort put in, and you know, my credit is a testament, or, you know, credit to me is that it's a testament to all of us. And they've, you know, those guys have done extraordinary things, and all the way back to Steve Huff and these other guys. I mean, there's a responsibility to carry that on. Right. And I challenge the next generation, you know, the other guides, you know, guys that are, you know, thinking about making a life change and coming to the Keys, young guys, you know, who might be the future guides here. You know, you pay attention, you know, come here. There's a responsibility that comes with being a Florida Keys fishing guide, and it has nothing to do with putting up numbers. You know, there's an etiquette here. There's a work, you know, etiquette, a work ethic, you know, that's, like I said, Bobby Paulson. Right. Yeah, I think everybody should have to watch Bob Paulson pull the northeast corner of the Marquesas, because, you know, that's what it's about. You know, that kind of effort. And I think that that goes off the water as well. You know, you're a professional. Mm-hmm. You have a responsibility to uphold the highest professional standards of any outdoor experience, you know, on the bow of this skiff or on the back of the skiff here. And that comes with some sacrifice off the water to give back.
Well said.
Thank you, Willie.
No, thank you guys.
So awesome.
Been a treat
be
having
in
you
the
in the
treehouse and hanging with you.
You're a good man.
Yeah. Thank you guys so much, and well done on all of this. It's so exciting what you're doing, Andy and Nikki, with these podcasts. I think it's important work, and I want to commend you on doing a great job, and keep it up. And it's exciting stuff, man.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Will.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
When I saw his West Side Story.